Welcome to Chapter 2. We are going to be adding values and ethics into our arguments. So we aren't starting from scratch. We're taking all of the information you learned in the last two modules, and now we're just adding a few more things on top of it. So we're still talking a lot about argument, but now we're going to add in the values and the ethics that go into our arguments. So these are our objectives for this chapter. All of this information is in your textbook, and you should have already done a textbook review where you have gone through all of this. This screencast is to give you the information a second time and to hear it maybe taught in a little bit of a different way. Again, it's very important to put the textbook information and my screencasts together in hopes that there will be full learning involved. So before I begin, I want to make sure we really understand what values are. So when I say values, I'm speaking of things that are very important to you, things that you hold in your heart. For example, I value my family. I value my friends. I value my health. Okay, you may have the same values. We have personal values that everyone holds dear, but then we also have societal values that everyone finds important. For example, freedom, justice, safety. These are all societal values as well as personal values. So anything that you hold in your heart that is important to you is a value. And why is this even important? How does this apply to critical thinking? Well, when you are developing as a critical thinker and a critical reader, it's really important that you understand who you are and what you believe and why you think the way you think. This keeps you open-minded as you're having arguments or reading arguments, and it really allows you to take strong stances on certain issues. It's very important for you to know how you stand on certain issues and to be confident with it. You can't take a side until you know what it is that you believe. So kind of think about that for a little bit. What do you believe? How do you feel about certain things? So for example, if I were to ask you your stance on these value issues, if you're just going to give me a quick yes or no, should prostitution be legalized? Should all drug use be legalized? Should couples only be allowed to adopt a baby of the same ethnicity? Should same-sex marriage continue to be legal in the US? So right now, you should have had an instant yes, no, or maybe as I ask these questions. Your answer to these questions are based on your values because these are value issues. So it's your value system that says yes or no to these particular issues. So a couple of critical terms. So these are very important terms for this chapter. So again, knowing that values are your core beliefs or desires that guide you. They are what you hold to be very, very important. And our values will determine how we behave in certain situations, but they also determine how we feel about certain issues. Now, assumptions are ideas that we take for granted. They are often unspoken, they are inferred. This is again why we practiced inference, is that you will never find an assumption written directly within the print. An assumption is what you will assume about another person making the argument or about an author making the argument. There are two types of assumptions. There are value assumptions, and these are our beliefs about how the world should be. So they reflect an individual's values, hence value assumptions. So when you're looking for the value assumption, you're thinking, what values must that person hold important to make the argument they are? And then reality assumptions, this is chapter 3, these are the easier assumptions because these are assumptions about how the world actually is. So a reality assumption is understanding how the world works. What are the rules? What are the laws? What are some of the unspoken rules about our society? And that's something we're going to cover more in Chapter 3. So here's how it all fits into argument. So you have your elements that make up arguments. Again, issue, your conclusion, which is your stance or position, and the reasons. Now, as we learned in the last PowerPoint, that reasons are the most important portion of the argument. As critical thinkers and critical readers, we analyze the reasons that are given in an argument. And as we're analyzing those reasons, we're looking for the value assumptions because they help us to understand the reasons better, knowing where the other people are coming from. So the value assumptions are always embedded within the reasons. And the reality assumptions are also embedded within the reasons. So you have both of these assumptions that are hidden within all of the reasons. And that is what we as critical thinkers look for. Okay, and they answer the questions, what is right? What should I do or be? And what is true and factual? What do we take for granted or as a given fact? Because we assume a lot in our society. And one thing that's interesting about us humans, whether we realize it or not, is we often assume others hold the same values as us. It's just sort of a natural thought process that we don't think about how different other people are at times. And I always like to do this activity whenever I teach in-person courses. So we're going to kind of play around with it here because obviously we're not all together in a classroom, but I'll tell you what I have found when I do this. I always have these particular value systems, cheating, stealing, lying. So when you think about these three terms, they're not positive terms, obviously, but how would you order these terms from the worst to the least worst, if that is such a thing? So think about how would you put those in order? Is cheating the worst? Is stealing the worst? Or lying, which would be the least offensive of the three? So kind of think how you would order these for a moment. Now, what's interesting is when I do this in the classroom, I always have people with Post-it notes with these words on it, and people in teams of 4, and I ask them as a team to order these words. And the first thing they do is they instantly will put them in order. And then people will start asking questions. They'll start saying, but wait, what kind of cheating are we talking about here? Are we talking about just, cheating on a test or cheating in a relationship? And then, wait, what kind of lying? Are we talking about pathologic lying or maybe, those little white lies that we tell our friends sometimes, like, oh yeah, that dress looks great on you, hee hee. What are we talking about here? And stealing, I mean, is this, like are we just going in and stealing things or what? What is each one really comprised of? And what's interesting about that is what people are doing is they're actually hitting on their value system. Because for some people, and it's interesting for everybody at the table to hear this, cheating in a relationship was way worse to them than cheating on a test. And then for other people at the table, they were like, no, cheating is cheating. It's equally bad. You shouldn't, kind of rationalize it. Same with lying. Lying is lying. It's equally bad. You shouldn't say, oh, but white lies kind of keep the peace, or we're being kind, and so the discussion that follows is very interesting because it's all about our values. How each person feels about this is different, and that is okay. We do not all have the same values, and again, it's okay. We just have to respect that with one another. And we do the same with these terms too: trust, empathy, respect, family, friends, acquaintances, and society. And the interesting part of this is so many people assume that everybody puts family first, But it's not the case. Oftentimes, people will put friends first or even society first, and then that creates an interesting discussion at the table. And so, do this activity with people in your home or even people at work, just out of curiosity. Have them order, especially these three words here, and see what their value systems, say, and see if they start to kind of rationalize or need clarification about each of the words. It's interesting. So again, just to review, values are things that you hold important. Value assumptions are your beliefs about what is good and important. They're unwritten, they are assumed, they are inferred. And value conflicts are disagreements about the important values in the issue. We're going to do a whole demonstration on value conflicts. So we're going to get into assumptions. I'm going to do a little with assumptions. So I'm going to ask you, is cheating on an exam unethical? Is having your roommate take a test for you unethical? Is buying a term paper unethical? Now, your answers to these questions are your value systems. And there's no judgment. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my gosh, you think it's okay to cheat on a test. It's you. You decide what is okay in your life and in your world. Your values are what give you this answer. Okay? And then you ask the questions, who is harmed? What greater good is affected here? And it does also create another really interesting discussion. This might be another discussion to have with other students if you ever get to be around other students. So let's look at this little paragraph here for value assumptions. Many parents prefer to educate their children at home. These parents want to ensure their children are being taught appropriately and are receiving parent-approved instruction. They want to be sure their children are not exposed to lessons children obtain from traditional public schools. Use your inference skills and think about what this person is really saying about public schools and how they are comparing it to homeschooling. What is this person saying between the lines? So the value assumptions in this is obviously the person making that statement, they do value education. They also value their personal beliefs about education. They believe they are stronger teachers for their children, okay? They also want to protect their children. They value their children in that respect. They do not want their children exposed to certain things that do not fall into their value systems. And they want to ensure their children are only exposed to their values, which they, of course, feel are superior. And again, no judgment. This is their value systems. This is how they believe. So that last paragraph yielded this inferred information, and because we've based all of this on values, these are the value assumptions. This is what we can assume about their values. Let's do one more. Now, same thing. Many parents prefer to educate their children at home, but these parents want to ensure their children are receiving a high level of instruction and are being strongly challenged. This will help their children become high achievers who can enter college at a younger age than their peers who attend traditional public schools. Now, think about the different tones of each paragraph. They're both about homeschooling, but in one, it had a little bit more of a protective value, whereas hopefully you've inferred this one has much more of an achievement value to it. And that's the value assumptions. These people, again, they value education, but their value system really focuses on achievement and success. They too believe they are stronger children and their children's need to be challenged academically. They want high achievers, and they think attending college at a young age is a marker of success. So this is how you find these values.